Hey Presto, Foxtel is killing its streaming service in favour of Foxtel Play.
While Google unveils new Pixel phones and a load of other high-tech goodies.
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel. Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner, and this week, the hardest working man in showbiz, Alex Kidman, is on long service leave. So we're joined by his stunt double, Angus Kidman, tech journo extraordinaire and editor-in-chief of Finder.com.au. Gus, welcome to the big chair.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be the stunt Kidman for this occasion.
We're also joined by a man with his finger on the pulse of all things Android and Google, Ausdroid editor Dan Tyson. Dan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here as always.
Angus, what's new in tech?
Vodafone has confirmed that it will switch off its 2G network in September next year, making it the last of the three network carriers to do so in Australia. Telstra customers lose 2G at the beginning of December this year, and Optus follows in April 2017.
Aussies continue to tune out of broadcast television, according to the latest Australian multi-screen report. We're watching 2.9% less television than this time last year, which doesn't sound too bad until you realise those numbers are propped up by Australians over 50 watching slightly more TV than last year. When you just look at the under 35s, time in front of the box watching broadcast television plunged 10%, which doesn't paint a rosy picture for the broadcasters.
Samsung's woes continue as a smoking Galaxy M87 smartphone forced the evacuation of a Southwest Airlines jet just before takeoff. It appears the handset in question was one of the replacement handsets issued by Samsung after the first batch was found to have an unfortunate habit of bursting into flames due to a battery fault.
The NBN's regional coverage is set for a boost with its second satellite launching into orbit this week. SkyMuster 2 joins SkyMuster 1, which together will offer 25 megabits per second download speeds to Australians living beyond the reach of the fixed line and fixed wireless NBN rollout. So, Gus, the time is finally up for 2G. All three Australian telcos have decided they're going to kill it off in the next 12 months. Is it worth shedding tears over this?
I don't think it's worth shedding tears. I think it was a necessary sort of change. It's still definitely going to be a problem, though, for the various Nokia fetishists and older people who've hung on to their phone for a decade or more and who perhaps don't realise that they're just going to lose reception. Probably the biggest problem there is with Telstra, and they're the first one to switch it off. So I imagine that there's a lot of cheap prepaid phones getting sold in Telstra stores right around now after Telstra sent out text messages to sort of try and stir up concern within that community.
Yeah, it's really, I think, the nanophones that are going to be the issue. My mum got a text message a couple of months ago letting her know that it's going on. So they're letting people know, but people, if they don't know a lot about tech, then need someone to show this message to and say, can you tell me what the hell this means? So, I'll be looking to write a few stories over the next couple of months explaining to people what's going on. Dan, how long is it since you played with a 2G phone? Is this a big issue for Android people?
I don't think there's actually any 2G Android phones out there. We started with 3G, so that's basically about it. I mean, the biggest change is obviously going to be for the embedded systems out there that do actually use 2G, so things like medical alarms and security systems
and vending
machines
stuff like that. And stuff like that.
Yeah, so like just really basic low-level data spewers or receivers that are sort of going to really have to get some stuff changed, and a lot of those you'll probably find won't even notice until the network goes off and suddenly all these people start going, what's going on?
Yes, it's the Y2K of comms.
Oh no Coke today.
So as 2G goes down, 5G is coming up. Is this something worth getting excited about?
It is in the long run. Like, it's going to be good to have an improved 5G network, not necessarily for the speed, which is the aspect everyone hypes on about, and Telstra was out there boasting a couple of weeks about how fast its connectivity was. But really, it's about the two key things with 5G are that more people will have the same speed at the same time, so that hopefully you can avoid the well-known stadium effect of suddenly everyone's trying to use their phone, no one gets on, and you'll have better latency, which actually is going to help out all those vending machines and other sort of Internet of Things devices in the long run.
Yeah, I was amazed. They were talking about sub 1 millisecond ping times on mobile, which is great news, for example, if you're a gamer and you're stuck on mobile and it's never really been practical to get those low ping times. And yeah, the congestion, obviously. I was at the grand final. Kana Bulldogs, just got my voice back in the last day or so. And I was actually surprised that I was sending text messages to people and they were getting through. A few years ago, I was at I think it was the St Kilda drawn grand final, and I was sending text messages to people at halftime that weren't arriving until three-quarter time. So something had improved there, but yeah, that stadium effect is always going to be an issue. So anything they can do to improve that is good. Dan, do you find yourself stuck in a crowd and getting nowhere?
Oh, look, I avoid crowds like the plague, so I haven't actually been in a situation like that for a while, except for places like Google I over in the US and that sort of thing, which is a completely different system. But I know a lot of friends who actually do go things like the games and like rugby and AFL and stuff like that, and definitely experience the same sort of issues. So anything they can do to that, I mean, they've come a long way since rolling out. They used to just bring cows along with the cell on wheels to sort of ameliorate that effect temporarily. But it seems like a lot of the carriers have actually updated their core networks to allow for more bandwidth and things at stadium events. So if 5G is going to improve that even more, I think no one's going to complain about that at all.
So what everyone's assumed was inevitable, that we were going to see some shrinking in the Australian streaming media space, has finally happened this week with the announcement that as of next year, Presto will be no more. Foxtel is killing us off. Foxtel is killing it off. Adam, what's happening here?
Yes, up in a puff of smoke. Who would have thought it? This town was never really big enough for Netflix, Presto and Stan, not to mention QuickFlix. And to be perfectly honest, I might have put money on Stan as the one to go, because Presto had the backing of Foxtel. So it had the HBO premium content, it had friends with deep pockets, and I would have thought maybe Stan would be in trouble. But what's happened is that Presto is a joint venture between Foxtel and Seven. Seven is bailing, Foxtel is buying out Seven's half of the business, and then Foxtel is shutting Presto down and trying to move all those people over to Foxtel Play, which is its basically pay TV light streaming service. So the big winner there, I think, is Foxtel, and the big loser is free-to-air television, which has just spent 2 years drumming up customers for Foxtel.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always had the reverse view. I always figured Presto would be the first one to go. And this is because people hate Foxtel.
Yes.
Foxtel is a brand that people take up because they have to.
You shouldn't underestimate that,
Yeah, if they want to watch sport in a live capacity, it's good for that. But nobody's happy about it. Nobody likes paying for a service and then getting ads on it. So I think that, even though it gave them the rights to stuff, nobody had the rights to everything, and it was going to be the disliked one. Stan came into it looking like the Ocker challenger. Stan has done the most work in terms of doing its own content. It hasn't done heaps, but it's done enough to look like, hey, we're taking this market kind of seriously. And you can see that in the numbers from Roy Morgan that suggest that while Netflix has far more than either of them, Stan has something like twice as many subscribers as Presto did.
Yeah.
So on a numbers game, it was becoming clear that if something died off just on that basis, Presto was going to be the one to go.
Presto could never quite make up its mind where it fitted as well, because it had this awkward multi-tier pricing system where you could pay, we'll say something like $10 for just movies, or $10 for just TV shows, or $15 for both. Or I can't remember what the exact numbers were, but you kind of had to choose packages, and straight away you're like, but didn't we get Netflix to get away from this whole kind of thing? It's like, just shut up and take my $10 and give me everything. So I think that kind of put people on the back foot straight away. Dan,
exactly.
are you a streaming man? Is there a particular service that you go for?
Yeah, I actually do Netflix and Presto, and I was waiting on a sort of... I actually got Presto on a 6-month trial, and I was waiting on Stan to give me longer than a 30-day trial before I actually started paying them money, but I think I might have to head over to Stan and start paying them some money and go from there, but... Yeah, I mean, Presto, you're right, Adam. It was one of those things where it was a bit confusing. It was sort of like Foxtel's own packages, where there's too many packages to sort of work out what you exactly want. It's the app actually has also failed on me quite a few times.
A lot of people have complained about the app.
The Android TV app itself has failed me so many times. My son has tried to watch a movie on there about 3 or 4 times, and now he won't even load that anymore. He'll just go straight to Netflix. So he's given up on it. I'm just giving up on it. I'll cancel the subscription, and hello, Stan, let's have some money to you, buddy.
It's interesting we're highlighting how confusing the pricing was to Presto, because the alternative Foxtel Play that they want to move to, when the pricing is even worse. It's far more expensive and it's far more confusing.
Yeah, I think I'm just giving up on Foxtel altogether. It's one of those things that you've had your shot. I was with you, but if you're just going to do that, I'm out.
That's the big challenge for them, because Foxtel has ideas of migrating all these Presto customers over to Foxtel Play. But kind of the reason why they're on Presto is because they don't want to be on something like Foxtel Play. So if they're smart, I think what they would do is give everyone who was paying for Presto 3 months access to Foxtel Play at the same price they were paying for Presto. Just to get them in, give them a taste of it, and see if they like it. If you say to them from day one, well, you're now going to have to deal with packages and we want extra money and stuff, I think people are just going to walk.
Absolutely. I think what they're going to see is a really huge boost in subscriber numbers around June next year, when the next series of Game of Thrones starts. Yeah. Because you can sign up for Foxtel Play, you can just get the drama channel, you can have more or less live streaming access to Game of Thrones for it's only 8 weeks next year, I think. You'll do that and then you'll cancel it. And I think there's always been that genuine desire from people with that show to have a legitimate way of watching it that wasn't mega painful.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will say, look, I'll happily give you $20 or $30 for those 2 months, but then people will shut it down. We know that all these services have a lot of people who do switch on, switch off, and that's the one, it's all about what content you've got, and that's the one show they've got that I can imagine people going, you know what, I'll pay that, I'll be happy with that for that amount of time, but then after that, no, you're not having money for the rest of the year.
Yeah, they've done deals for the last couple of seasons where, even though in theory it would cost you $50 a month to watch Game of Thrones on Foxtel Play because you had to buy the 2 packages, you're getting it for close to $30-$35 a month because they'll offer you those deals. Now, I know that Foxtel Play is redoing its pricing in December. They're still keeping the idea of packages and bundles, but I think it's going to be cheaper. Do we have a calculation on what it would actually cost to watch Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones you can do at the $10 level at the moment. You can actually do that at the $10 a month, and that's a big improvement on where they were.
But don't you need to pay? But I thought you needed to pay for the basic entertainment package before you.
No,
could pay
it's
for
now
the
sitting in one
package.
of the basic packages. My understanding is
Really?
it's shifted, so that's a really important shift. That you've actually got this option to do it in a fairly pain-free way, as opposed to having to pay $30 and hope you can find a coupon or something. So I think maybe they've recognised that they've got to get people on there. They're still charging a fortune for the sport channel, and they're still charging a fortune for the full-on movies channel.
Yeah.
But they've cut down the price of those other packages and made it less restrictive in terms of what you have to have.
If they can get HBO into those entry-level packages, that'll make a huge difference. Dan, is this enough to keep you coming back? What do you think you're going to do?
Yeah, as I said, you guys said, Game of Thrones is about the biggest draw card they've got, and I love that show, and I'm willing to pay the money just to watch that show, but I'm going to drop off. Their whole catalogue really hasn't got anything to keep me there. I'd rather pay for Stan, which has got a few interesting things which I haven't explored yet. I've been pretty much through all the Presto catalogue. Play really doesn't have much to keep me, so I'll keep paying for Netflix, which keeps churning out great hits like Luke Cage, which came out in the last week, and yeah, unless Foxtel's going to start investing some more money into original programming, I don't really see myself wanting to stay.
All right, Angus, we had a visit from the Google Ferry this week. It's a whole lot of new stuff. What did you see that grabbed your eye?
Yes, we had an enormous amount of new tech at Google's Made by Google event. Yeah, they clearly want to brand themselves seriously as a hardware company at this point. So we saw new Pixel and Pixel XL phones. We saw a new Chromecast that's got 4K support. We saw a new Daydream VR headset. We saw this nifty new home speaker, although Australians can't get this, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But there's no doubt that the biggest part of the attention was on the new Google phone. So previously, Google has bought out its own branded phones as Nexus phones. Nexus is no more. We've now moved on to the Pixel phones, picking up a branding that Google had previously used for some of its Chromebook devices. And so we had the Pixel and the Pixel XL. They're shiny new handsets. They've got shiny new enhanced versions of Android sitting on them. So really, I want to turn to the Android expert here and sort of to ask Dan. So do you think right now is the Pixel the best Android phone anyone could get hold of, or does it still have some problems it needs to solve?
It's probably, in terms of definition, it's probably the best one you're going to get. They've finally done what Android fans have been wanting for years, which is to go on premium hardware. Unfortunately, that premium hardware comes with a price, and that's the major kickback. Yeah. So at the moment, in terms of quality, you got the latest version of Android, which is actually going to have exclusive features. It's got the best quality hardware, and that's basically the premium package. So if you want that, you're really going to have to pay for it, and that's going to be the hurdle that Google is going to have to overcome to sort of, if they can sell that to customers and make the money there.
So we're talking about iPhone style pricing here. So what particular is there in the hardware here that justifies that?
Well, we're talking about design, so we got the high-level aluminium unibody, which the manufacturer, who Google actually didn't mention at the event, is HTC. That's one of the starters. You got that, but then you're moving into things like the processor is the new Snapdragon 821. It's the first one coming out in sort of the Western markets to run that processor. You got 4 gig of RAM, which is about the standard for most flagships this year. You're starting at 32 gig of storage. And that's a really good place to start. None of the 16, which has sort of been a 2016 change with phone manufacturers. It's mainly what they did actually spend a lot of time spruiking is the camera. They have said that it was given to DxOMark, who do all the ratings on the cameras, and it's the top rated one that they've ever had. So basically beating out the iPhone there. It's got a score of 89, which I believe beats the iPhone by 2, I think. I'd have to double check that. But yeah, so that's what you're sort of looking at. In terms of everything else, it's got the same Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or your GPS and stuff like that. It's got a fingerprint scanner on the back. But yeah, it's depending on which model you go for, you get the Quad HD screen on the higher end one, you get a full HD screen on the lower end one. But in terms of quality, design, hardware, it's pretty much got it all.
Do you think they're in danger of annoying their hardware partners, though?
It's one of those fine lines. I mean, the rumour is that they sold Motorola to get to appease Samsung, but then you've got Samsung who's sort of pushing back even more now. They're sort of pushing their Tyson OS on phones, which are getting more popular in India, or at least they're pushing more in India. So whether they're trying to appease them, it's another question. I mean, you've got the other players in the market. It's like Sony's sort of having a rough time, HTC's having an even rougher time, and the other vendors sort of aren't really focusing on it. So it's been what sort of Google fans and tech pundits have been asking for years, is for Google to actually finally build their own hardware. Yeah. Pixel has always represented the best of Google with the Chromebooks and the Pixel C then. So basically we're going to see if that's a bet that's going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah,
it's a risky bet. In as far as we have, previously the Nexus things, you had 2 selling points. They always had the most up-to-date software, and that's continuing, but they were also pretty reasonably priced. It was a chance to get something that was up-to-date, that had the latest software. They were never dirt cheap. They were never playing around in that kind of J1 ace end of the market, but they were having, they were generally good phones that were not costing you at that $1,000 level. And I'm just going to be interested to see whether they can make a dent into Samsung, because Samsung is totally who they're competing with here in the Android space. There are loads and loads of people. You've got your Huawei's and everyone else, your ZTEs, everyone else producing cheap, decent Android phones. But you haven't really had anyone else trying to make the running at the top end. I mean, Google must have a better chance than some people, but whether they can really do that, especially when they've taken the odd step of not partnering with every carrier in Australia, I found that interesting. If you want to buy this on a contract in Australia, Telstra is your only choice.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those things that's getting a little bit of pushback certainly from our readers, that Telstra is the only place you can buy it, because you're obviously going to be paying a premium through Telstra for anything you buy from them. Whether that works for them or not is going to be the big question. They haven't gone for things like in the US, they're offering financing through their Project Fi, which is their MVNO that they operate with, I think it's T-Mobile and Sprint. So it's one of those questions as to whether it's going to work outside the US, because in the UK they've partnered with EE, which is their sort of mid to high end partner. So obviously Australia's not as big a market as the UK and the US, so maybe they're concentrating there. They're sort of gone to the premium end of the market to sort of maybe get some of the sort of the sales assistants on side and maybe push it into people who maybe haven't tried a Pixel phone before. Who knows what they're sort of pushing, but we did hear that they were sort of going for that sort of marketing push of sort of the iPhone style level that we're going to see for Pixel. So it's one of those long-term bets which is risky, but if it pays off, I mean, Google's got a whole sort of stable of hardware that they can sort of bring in to support it down the track.
Is this what people want from Google? Now, I'm an iPhone user and I'm an Apple hardware user, but a big user of Google services, right? So for me, of all the things they just announced, that the handset's the thing I care the least about. because I'm not likely to use it. But the Chromecast, the home speaker, all of this Daydream stuff, I'm really interested in all of that stuff. Am I just biased because I'm an iPhone user? Or is the Android faithful waiting for this handset? Is that what they want? Or are they happy with the handset since the other services and hardware that they want?
Well, we're seeing a lot of pushback. Basically, people who were waiting to see what they were going to announce and the pricing. Once the pricing has come out, it's certainly seen a lot of people fall off as to where they actually want to purchase. So we've seen a lot of people who are now going, well, that's a bit expensive. I might look at other handsets, like things like the ZTE Axon 7, which is coming out shortly, and stuff like that. So I think they've sort of shot themselves in the foot with certain aspects of the market, but some people will just buy a sort of Pixel or Nexus phone no matter what. So because they want that software experience, and things like the Google Assistant are certainly things that a lot of people are going, well, that seems to be something we'd like to get a look at. So whether that's enough or not, that's the big question.
And the big question is, how long can you hold off on those services? Because really, if Google wants to keep the other Android sector on side, and if it wants to roll these things out in non-phone context to tablets or computers, it hasn't got a very long window where it can treat the digital assistant as a Pixel-only option. They can't sell that phone purely on that basis in the long run. And this is where it's going to touch on people like Adam, who have no interest in using that phone, but would like to be able to access some of those services through other devices. And I don't, Google's fundamental skills and its fundamental future are all in software. It can't keep that software tied to one device forever because it just doesn't work. That's an okay model for Apple because it built itself as a company that way the whole way through. Google is a services company, fundamentally. It can use hardware as a way of promoting and getting those services out there. But at the end of the day, the window where the only phone that you can get Google Assistant is Pixel, you're measuring in months. Maybe only 3, I would think.
So we had the Google Allo app come out, which had what I thought was the digital assistant in it, but maybe that's not. What's the difference between what this phone can do and what the Allo app can do on any Android or iOS device?
It's exactly the same. It is the same assistant, and that's probably part of the thing here. We're looking at something that's still in preview edition. So they're going to work on things like they're going to throw all their machine learning stuff at it to improve the assistant to the point where it's more sort of a wider release sort of style of thing. So basically with Assistant on the Pixel phones, instead of Google Now where you hold, or Google Now on tap, where you hold down the home button to get the Now on tap to then read the screen, that will then operate Now on tap, and you can then flick up to get the Assistant to then come in and offer you suggestions and stuff based on what's on your screen. So that's now baked into Android, and if you have Allo, you're accessing the same Assistant, but you've got to then access an app. So you still can get access to the Assistant, but you just have to have an app on another phone. So that's basically what we're looking at.
Yeah. So apart from the Pixel handsets, all the stuff they showed off, some of which you and I saw at I/O in May, what really grabbed your fancy? What did you get excited about?
I'm actually really excited about Daydream. That's sort of VR's been the big sort of winner for everyone this year. VR is the future for a lot of companies at the moment. How far that goes down the track is another question. There's been a little bit of people saying it's not quite as good as they sort of expected, with a bit of light bleed from it. But in terms of praise for what they're actually doing, there's a lot of it for Daydream. Like that is apparently the headset is quite comfortable to wear. It's the experiences in terms of using the controller are actually really good. So things like that. But I believe people were trying. There was a Harry Potter demo that's tied to the upcoming Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them movie. That sort of you're using the controller that's paired to the phone as a wand, so you can sort of perform magic spells and do sort of stuff like that. And that's getting a lot of praise. So I'm sort of excited about that, to sort of see where it comes from, but unfortunately we, again, still haven't got a release date for that here in Australia.
It's approaching that. I was excited by something much more prosaic, which is that on the new updated Chromecast, it's got an Ethernet port.
Oh, yeah, okay. I can get excited about that.
Yeah, and it's a simple thing. Like there are some other updates to that too, like it's now got support for 4K and HDR, and that's nice. But I think for people who are serious about using, and the Chromecast has been a pretty good streaming device since the first generation. So a lot of what we've seen happen to it has been cosmetic. The notion of recognising, okay, you know what, when you really decided to make this your dedicated streaming device, it would be nice to give it the reliability of a wide network. So purely for that, I'm quite excited about the fact that we're getting an updated Chromecast. It's about it's much more expensive. It's up at $100, where you can routinely pick up the current Chromecast for under $50 without even shopping around very hard. But I think for people who've decided that a Chromecast is a better way of making their TV smart than waiting for firmware updates, and I think that's a very wise move. That Ethernet connectivity, really simple thing to do, but sometimes it's just those little hardware tweaks that make the difference.
If you've got an early Ultra HD television that didn't get the Ultra HD Netflix app and hasn't got it since, then this is now probably the cheapest and easiest way to bring Ultra HD Netflix to your TV. Before now, you would have been buying one of the new Ultra HD Blu-ray players from Samsung or Panasonic, or there was one other box, I can't remember what it was, but nothing this cheap. So there's definitely a market there for that. And the 4K as well, so the Ultra HD. But if you've got a television, an Ultra HD television that supports HDR, I just got all my acronyms mixed up. Let's start again. It also does HDR, which is high dynamic range. If you've got a television that supports high dynamic range, then it's not that old, which means it's going to have Netflix HDR built in it anyway, but it's still nice to have it there.
And it also supports Dolby Vision, which is their sort of standard they're pushing as well. So that's another bonus as well for the sort of the home theatre enthusiasts.
That is big, because Dolby Vision actually, there's two sort of HDR's high dynamic range, so it's sort of extra detail in the highlights and extra detail in the shadows, and there's Ultra HD Premium and Dolby Vision are kind of the two main standards that get thrown around. But what's important about Dolby Vision is it actually requires a chip in the television and a chip in the player to all talk to each other. So there's not a lot of Dolby Vision gear around yet. And the fact that this does that is very interesting if you're looking for a bit of future-proofing.
Definitely, but as you said, there's not a lot of sets, especially in Australia. In the US, there's a lot of models that we don't get here, and they're sort of coming out with it. But yeah, definitely something that you want to look for, because the quality of Dolby Vision is absolutely spectacular. So if you can get it and then get something cheap, which this is going to probably retail around the $100 mark here in Australia, it's going to be at that sort of quality. I'm very, very interested in that.
So what about this home speaker thing? Are we going to see that here?
We're not seeing it here straight away. We've sort of heard that we're going to see it eventually, but it's obviously going to take some work to get it into Australia to tie to our services, because obviously some of the US services aren't here in Australia. Yeah. And it's one of those things, you want everything to work, but I'm getting one out, rain, hail or shine. I am definitely getting one of those home speakers, just purely even just to have it as a sort of a high-end sort of audio Chromecast sort of device sitting around the house.
Yeah, people have got the Amazon Echoes working here as well, so there are ways to get these things to work. You just, as you say, you might not be able to do everything.
And I think it'll work better than the Echo, because the Echo is so tied to your Amazon account. You have to do a lot of work even to be able to buy one. It's quite a complicated process. Whereas fundamentally, you've got one of these devices, it's going to recognize your Google account. Maybe you can't integrate to everything, but I think the basics will work pretty well. At most, you might need a VPN to persuade it to go somewhere else, but I think all the importers will have their VPN set up and ready to go.
Absolutely.
Well, that just about wraps it up for this episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Gus and to Dan for joining us this week.
Always a pleasure, anytime.
Thanks very much for having the stunt, Kidman.
Remember, if you've got any comments, hit us up in the comments section on YouTube, via Twitter, or the Facebook Vertical Hold page.
Thanks for joining us, and remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button.
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.